I never thought freedom could be stolen with a single piece of paper. But that morning, when I opened my front door, there it was, taped across it with like a scarlet warning. Notice of violation. All firearms must be removed from your property immediately. Failure to comply will result in fines and legal action. I stared at the bold, black letters until the words blurred. At first, I thought it had to be a mistake, a prank, some kind of sick joke. But the HOA seal at the bottom was unmistakable. My jaw clenched as I read it again. Remove all firearms from my home? In a state where the Second Amendment isn't just law, it's a way of life. The sound of small feet pulled me back. My son, Jacob, stood in the hallway, rubbing his eyes. "Dad, what's that?" he asked. I folded the paper quickly, shoving it behind my back. "Nothing you need to worry about, buddy. Go get ready for school." He nodded and shuffled away, but the weight of the notice pressed heavier against my hand. I stepped outside, the morning air sharp against my skin. That's when I saw her, Evelyn Parker, HOA president. She was already striding down the street, clipboard tucked under her arm like it was a weapon. Her pastel suit was perfectly pressed, her pearl necklace gleaming in the rising sun. She stopped when she saw me, lips curling into a tight smile. "Morning, Mr. Walker," she said sweetly, though her tone carried more steel than sugar. "I trust you received our notice?" I held the paper up, my grip tight enough to wrinkle it. "You're telling me I have to get rid of my guns?" "Not just yours," she replied smoothly. "The board has voted unanimously. Firearms are not permitted within lakeside meadows. They pose a danger to the community." I let out a bitter laugh. A danger? These aren't toys lying around. They're locked, secured, and legal. Some of them belong to my father. They're family heirlooms. Evelyn raised an eyebrow. "Heirlooms or not, the rule is clear. Remove them or face fines." Her calmness made my blood boil. "With all due respect, Mrs. Parker, the Second Amendment is clear too. You don't get to strip away my rights because you don't like the idea of a gun in the neighborhood." Her smile widened, but it didn't reach her eyes. "We're not stripping away rights, Mr. Walker. We're maintaining harmony. Rules are rules." My fists clenched over my dead body. The words slipped out before I could stop them. Her eyes glittered, cold and satisfied, as though she had been waiting for me to say that. She scribbled something onto her clipboard and turned sharply on her heel. Her heels clacked against the pavement until she disappeared around the corner. I stood frozen on the porch, the notice trembling in my hand. Inside, the house was silent. My wife, Sarah, leaned against the kitchen doorway, arms crossed, eyes wide. She had heard everything. "They can't do this," she whispered. I shook my head slowly. "They just did." For a moment, silence hung heavy between us. Then Sarah's voice broke, trembling with fear. "What happens if we don't comply?" I looked down at the notice again, the black letters burning into my vision. Fines, legal action, removal. I crumpled the paper in my fist. "Then we fight." But even as the words left my mouth, a chill spread through me. Because this wasn't just about a garden or a ramp or a mailbox. This was about freedom itself. And Evelyn Parker had just declared war. Most people in Lakeside Meadows saw guns as something to fear, something to lock away in a story from the news. To me, they were something else entirely. They were history. They were survival. They were family. I grew up in the Midwest, where opening day of hunting season was practically a holiday. My father taught me how to hold a rifle long before I learned how to drive. It wasn't about violence. It wasn't about danger. It was about respect. Respect for the tool in your hands, respect for the tradition it carried, and respect for the life it provided when you brought home food for table. Some of my earliest memories were my dad cleaning his rifle at the kitchen table, telling me stories about how his father had carried that same gun during his youth. When I turned 12, Dad handed me my first shotgun, not as a gift, but as a responsibility. "This is part of who we are," he said. "Take care of it, and it'll take care of you." Years later, when I joined the Army, those lessons never left me. Handling a weapon wasn't about aggression. It was about discipline, about safety, about knowing that sometimes the difference between life and death came down to the steadiness of your hands. After serving overseas, I came home with more than scars and memories. I came back with conviction that freedom wasn't just an idea. It was something you lived, protected, and passed down to your kids. That's why the collection mattered. Some were old hunting rifles, handed down through generations. Others were pieces I acquired during my service, legal, registered, locked in a safe that weighed more than I did. And then there was a revolver my dad had given me the day Jacob was born, a promise that one day I'd pass it on to him. Sarah didn't grow up around guns, but she came to understand. She saw the way I handled them, the way I taught Jacob never to touch them without me present. Safety first. Always. It wasn't about fear. It was about knowledge. Someday, I told Jacob one evening, as he sat beside me in the garage while I cleaned the revolver, this will be yours. Not so you can use it whenever you want, but so you'll understand where you come from. This is history. This is family. His eyes were wide, his hands small, but I could see the pride in his face. He wasn't just looking at a weapon. He was looking at a legacy. That's why the HOA notice cut so deep. It wasn't just a rule. It wasn't just a fine. It was someone telling me to erase generations of history, to erase the very lessons my father had fought to give me. And more than that, it was someone telling me that I couldn't pass those lessons on to my son. I sat at the kitchen table that night, the violation notice crumpled beside me, the clock ticking loud in the silence. Sarah placed a hand on my shoulder. David, she said softly, what if they're serious? What if they take the house? I looked up at her, at the fear in her eyes. She wasn't wrong. We'd poured everything into this home. Our savings, our time, our dreams for Jacob's future. Losing it would break us. But I couldn't let her see the fear clawing inside me. They won't, I said firmly. Not without a fight. She searched my face, and for a moment I thought she might argue. But instead, she just nodded, her fingers tightening around mine. Later that night, after she'd gone to bed, I opened the safe. The cold metal of the revolver felt heavy in my hand, not because of its weight, but because of what it meant. I thought about my father, about the promise I'd made to him and to myself. They think they can take this away, I whispered into the empty room. But they don't know who they're dealing with. As I slid the revolver back into the safe and turned the key, I felt a fire light inside me. This wasn't just about guns. This wasn't just about me. This was about freedom. And I wasn't going to let anyone, not even Evelyn Parker and her clipboard army, strip that away. On the surface, Lakeside Meadows looked like a slice of paradise. Perfectly trimmed hedges lined every driveway. Identical mailboxes stood in neat rows, painted white and polished clean. Every lawn looked like it belonged on the cover of a real estate magazine. No weeds, no overgrown patches, just endless emerald green. It was a kind of neighborhood where people waved politely while secretly counting how many times you mowed your grass that month. A place where everything looked beautiful, but under the surface, there was rot. And Evelyn Parker was a gardener, pruning away anything she didn't approve of. 2 days after the notice arrived, a new envelope landed in my mailbox. This one wasn't a warning. It was a bill. $500, initial fine for firearm violation. The letter was crisp, typed in official language that dripped with authority. Payment due in 10 days. If not paid, additional penalties would apply. I stood in my driveway, reading it over and over, my blood pounding in my ears. Sarah came out with Jacob trailing behind. She saw the letter in my hands and froze. Already, she asked. I nodded, jaw tight. They didn't waste any time. Jacob tugged at my sleeve. Dad, are we in trouble? I knelt down, trying to hide the fury boiling inside me. No, son, we're not the ones in trouble. They are. But inside, I wasn't so sure. That evening, I decided to confront Evelyn directly. She was always at the clubhouse in the evenings, sipping tea with the board, pretending to run the neighborhood like it was her personal kingdom. When I walked in, the room went quiet. For board members sat around the table, papers spread before them. Evelyn looked up, her smile sharp and thin. Mr. Walker, she said, feigning surprise. We didn't expect you tonight. I dropped the fine notice onto the table. Care to explain this? She glanced at it briefly, then folded her hands neatly. As I said, firearms are no longer permitted within lakeside meadows. That's your fine for noncompliance. You can't do this, I snapped. This is a constitutional right. You don't get to override state law with your little handbook. Her eyes narrowed slightly, though her voice stayed smooth. This community voted for these rules. If you don't like them, you're free to move. The smugness in her tone made my fist clench. We're not moving. This is our home, and you're not going to bully us out of it. One of the other board members, a balding man with glasses, cleared his throat nervously. Evelyn, maybe we should... But she silenced him with a single glare. Then she turned back to me, her smile returning. Mr. Walker, I'll make this simple. You can comply, or you can continue receiving fines. And let me assure you, they add up quickly. Non-payment leads to liens. Liens lead to foreclosure. Do you really want to lose your home over a few old guns? Her words hit me like a punch to the gut, but I refused to let her see the fear. I leaned forward, my voice low and steady. Try it. See what happens. Her pen hovered over her clipboard, and she jotted something down with deliberate strokes. Then she looked up, her expression smug and unshaken. Good night, Mr. Walker. I left the clubhouse with my heart pounding, every step echoing with anger. The night air was cool, but I was burning inside. When I got home, Sarah was waiting at the door. One look at my face told her everything. They're not backing down, are they? She asked. I shook my head. No. And this fine is just beginning. Sure enough, the next week, another envelope arrived. This one doubled the penalty. $1,000. Ongoing firearm violation. Then came another. $1,500. The numbers climbed like a fire out of control, each letter more threatening than the last. Neighbors started whispering. Some crossed the street to avoid me. Others offered quiet words of support, looking over their shoulders as they spoke, afraid Evelyn might see. By the end of the month, the fines had stacked so high I could barely keep track. Evelyn wanted me broken, desperate, begging for mercy. But she underestimated one thing. I'd been through worse. And if she thought she could scare me into giving up my rights, she was about to find out just how wrong she was. At first, it was just the fines. Numbers typed neatly on paper, delivered to my mailbox with mechanical precision. But soon, the HOAs were moved beyond letters. I started noticing them. Board members, neighbors who never used to glance my way, now standing at the edge of their driveways, phones in hand, pretending to check messages, but their cameras always pointed toward me. One afternoon, I caught Mrs. Thompson, the vice president of the HOA, crouched behind a hedge with a telephoto lens, snapping pictures of my garage. When I confronted her, she stammered something about routine documentation and scurried away like a guilty child. That night, another notice appeared. Unauthorized storage of firearms confirmed. Additional penalty applied. They weren't just enforcing rules. They were stalking me. Sarah tried to keep her calm, but the strain showed. At dinner, she pushed food around her plate, barely eating. David, this is getting out of hand, she whispered. They're watching us. What happens when they come after Jacob? Her words cut deeper than any fine. And the truth was, I had already seen the cracks forming. At school, Jacob's classmates had started whispering. Your dad's a criminal, one boy taunted. He's going to get arrested for hiding guns. When Jacob came home in tears, fists clenched, I had no answers. Just a hollow promise that everything would be okay. But in the dark, when he couldn't hear, I admitted to Sarah that I didn't know how much longer we could endure it. The next blow came in the form of a letter slipped under our door late one evening. No envelope, no signature. Just 4 words scrawled in thick black ink. Get out or else. Sarah's hand shook as she held it. This isn't just fines anymore, David. This is harassment. This is a threat. I grabbed the note, crumpling it in my fist. That's exactly what they want. They want to scare us into leaving. But we're not running. Still, even as I said it, unease gnawed at me. because every night I heard it, footsteps outside our house. Slow, deliberate, circling the yard like predators testing the fence. By the time I got outside with a flashlight, they were gone, leaving only trampled grass and my pounding heartbeat. Then came the petition. One Saturday morning, Evelyn Parker herself knocked on doors, clipboard in hand, gathering signatures. The pitch was simple. Remove the walkers. They're endangering our community. By the end of the week, half the neighborhood had signed. We became pariahs. Neighbors who once shared BBQs with us now averted their eyes. Kids who once played with Jacob were pulled away by nervous parents. Sarah stopped going to the community pool, too embarrassed to face the stares and whispers. It was working. Evelyn's campaign wasn't just about money. It was about isolation, about breaking us until we broke ourselves. But what Evelyn didn't know, what she couldn't possibly understand, was that isolation didn't weaken me. It hardened me. I'd survived deserts where the air itself wanted you dead, nights where the sound of gunfire never stopped. Compared to that, Evelyn's dirty looks and midnight threats were nothing. Still, the war was wearing us down. Our savings dwindled as fines piled higher. Sarah woke in the night, whispering fears of foreclosure. Jacob grew quieter, retreating into himself. And yet, through all of it, I refused to bend. One evening, as I sat on the porch with the crumpled violation notices piled beside me, I whispered into the night, "You can push me, you can threaten me, you can find me into ground, but I will not surrender." I didn't know it then, but I wasn't the only one watching. Someone else had seen enough. And soon, an unexpected knock would change everything. It was a Tuesday night when I heard the knock. Not the sharp, impatient rapping of Evelyn Parker, but a slow, deliberate tap. 3 times. Pause. Then once more. I opened the door cautiously. On my porch stood Mr. Carter, the quiet man who lived 2 houses down. Retired, late 60s, always seen in his faded Marine Corps ball cap. He'd never spoken much beyond a polite gnawed at the mailbox. Tonight, his eyes carried the weight of secrets. "Mind if I come in?" he asked. Something in his tone made me step aside, without hesitation. Inside, he sat at the kitchen table, glancing at Sarah, who hovered nearby with crossed arms. He leaned forward, lowering his voice. "I know what they're doing to you," he said, "and you're not crazy. It's not about the guns." My pulse quickened. "Then what is it about?" He slid a manila folder across the table. I opened it to find photocopied documents, meeting notes, and property records. My eyes scanned line after line until the pieces clicked together. The gun crackdown was a smokescreen. Evelyn and 2 other board members had been working with a real estate developer, Silverstone Properties. They were targeting homeowners with non-compliance issues, hitting them with massive fines until they either sold cheap or lost their homes to foreclosure. The properties were then quietly sold to Silverstone, who planned to tear down sections of lakeside meadows for luxury townhouses. My throat tightened as I flipped through the evidence. "They're forcing people out." Carter nodded grimly. "Families with firearms, old sheds, solar panels, you name it. Anyone they can label a problem. You're just the biggest target because they know you'll fight. And if they break you, the rest will fall in line." Sarah covered her mouth, her face pale. "My God!" Carter leaned closer. "I've seen this before. They pick someone strong, someone who won't bend, and they destroy them to scare everyone else. But you're not alone anymore. I've been collecting this for months, waiting for someone with enough guts to stand up." I stared at him, the fire in my chest burning hotter. "Why me? Why now?" His eyes softened. "Because I know men like you. You don't scare easy. And because I wore a uniform once. Just like you. We didn't fight overseas just to come home and get pushed around by people with clipboards and greed in their eyes." The room was silent, except for the ticking clock on the wall. Finally, Sarah spoke. "So, what do we do?" Carter leaned back, his voice steady. "We build a case. We expose them at their own meeting. But we have to be smart. They'll deny everything unless we put it in front of everyone." For the next hour, we pored over the documents. Evelyn's signature on backroom agreements. notes from secret board sessions, emails discussing removing non-compliant families. Each page was another nail in the coffin of her perfect little kingdom. But Carter wasn't finished. From his jacket, he pulled out a small recorder. He set it on the table, clicking it on. "I've been recording their meetings," he explained. "Listen." The crackle of static gave way to Evelyn's voice, sharp and smug. "If we clear Walker out, the rest will cave. Silverstone's ready to move on phase 2. Higher property values, more profit. Lakeside Meadows will be exactly how we want it, and anyone who doesn't fit will be gone." Sarah gasped, her hand gripping mine tight. Carter switched off the recorder. "That's your smoking gun." For the first time in weeks, I felt something other than rage and fear. I felt hope, but Carter's expression grew serious. "You have to understand, the second she knows you have this, she'll come after you harder. She'll threaten everything you love. So when you go in ready." I nodded slowly, my jaw set. "Then it's time to turn the tables." That night, as Carter left and the house grew quiet, I stood at the window, staring out into the dark. Somewhere out there, Evelyn Parker was asleep, smug in her certainty that she had me cornered. But what she didn't know was that her empire was about to crack, because now I had the truth. And truth was the one weapon she couldn't silence. The night of the homeowners' meeting arrived heavy with tension. The air outside the clubhouse carried the scent of freshly cut grass and the low murmur of neighbors gathering, some curious, others nervous. I walked in with Sarah by my side and Mr. Carter just behind us. In my hand was a folder that could shatter everything Evelyn Parker had built. Inside, the room buzzed with restrained energy. Neighbors filled the folding chairs, whispering among themselves as they waited. At the front sat the board, 5 members aligned like soldiers at a parade, with Evelyn in the center. Her pastel suit was immaculate. Her pearls gleamed under the fluorescent lights, and her clipboard rested in front of her like a judge's gavel. When she saw me, her smile widened, but there was no warmth in it, only arrogance. "Mr. Walker," she said smoothly, her voice carrying across the room, "I hope you have come tonight prepared to finally accept responsibility for your violations." I placed the folder on the table in front of me, but I did not open it yet. "I am here," I said, my voice steady, "to show everyone the truth about what you've been doing." A ripple of whispers spread through the crowd. Evelyn's eyes narrowed. "Truth? The only truth here is that you have refused to follow the rules of this community." I took a breath and opened the folder, pulling out the first set of documents. "These are meeting notes and property records that show your so-called gun crackdown is not about safety at all. It is about money." Gasps echoed across the room as I held the papers up. For months, this board has been targeting families with bogus violations, piling fines until they could no longer fight back, and then selling their foreclosed homes to Silverstone Properties. The same developer who just happens to have business ties to you, Mrs. Parker. Evelyn's smile faltered for the first time. "That is absurd," she snapped. "Baseless accusations from a man who refuses to obey simple community standards." Mr. Carter stepped forward then, pulling the recorder from his pocket. He clicked it on, and Evelyn's own voice filled the room, crackling but unmistakable. "If we clear Walker out, the rest will cave. Silverstone is ready to move on phase 2. Higher property values, more profit. Lakeside Meadows will be exactly how we want it, and anyone who does not fit will be gone." The room erupted. Neighbors turned to one another, voices rising in shock and outrage. Evelyn's face drained of color as she realized her words had betrayed her. I pressed on, my voice sharp. "You want to destroy me, not because I own firearms, but because I would not bend to your corruption. You thought if you broke me, the rest of the community would fall in line. But you underestimated us. You underestimated all of us." One by one, neighbors began to stand. Mrs. Thompson, the vice president who had once cowered under Evelyn's glare, raised her voice. I was at those meetings. She silenced anyone who disagreed. She threatened to remove me from a board if I spoke up. Another resident shouted. She fined me for having solar panels, then told me to sell or leave. Voices joined together, louder, angrier, until the room was filled with the roar of a community that had finally found its courage. Evelyn slammed her clipboard on the table, her voice sharp with panic. "This meeting is out of order." But the people ignored her. Someone shouted, "Vote her out," and soon the chant spread like fire. "Vote her out! Vote her out!" The board members, pale and shaken, exchanged glances. At last, the balding man with glasses, the one who had once tried to speak up, raised his hand. I moved to remove Evelyn Parker as president effective immediately. The vote was swift, unanimous, and final. Evelyn's face twisted with fury as she gathered her papers, pearls rattling as her hands shook. "You will regret this," she hissed, but her words carried no weight anymore. She stormed out of the clubhouse, her heels clacking against the tile, her empire crumbling behind her. Silence followed for a moment. Then applause broke out, building into cheers that filled the room. People clapped me on the back, shook my hand, thanked me for standing up when they could not. But I only looked at Sarah and Jacob, standing in the back with tears in their eyes. Because this was never about applause or victory. It was about protecting them, protecting what mattered. The war was over, and for the first time in weeks, I could breathe. The morning after Evelyn Parker's downfall felt different. The sun seemed brighter, the air lighter, as though the weight pressing on our family had finally lifted. For the first time in weeks, I opened the front door without finding a notice taped to it. The mailbox was empty of threats. The street was quiet, peaceful in a way it had not been for far too long. Sarah brewed coffee in the kitchen, humming softly. Jacob sat at the table with his homework, his shoulders relaxed, no longer burdened by the whispers of classmates or the fear of losing his home. I stood in the garage, unlocking the heavy safe. The cold metal of the revolver pressed against my palm, steady and familiar. It no longer felt like evidence in a battle. It felt like what it had always been, a reminder of where I came from and what I had fought to protect. That weekend, I took Jacob out to the woods beyond the town. The trees stood tall, leaves rustling in the breeze, the air filled with the scent of earth and pine. I showed him how to hold a rifle, how to respect it, how to understand that power was not about intimidation, but about responsibility. He listened intently, his young eyes wide with pride. When he fired his first shot into a paper target, he turned to me with a grin that mirrored my own when my father had taught me the same lessons decades ago. "This is yours now, son," I told him quietly. "Not just a rifle, but everything it stands for. Freedom, responsibility, and the courage to defend both." He nodded solemnly, and in that moment, I saw the legacy carried forward. Back at Lakeside Meadows, the community began to heal. Neighbors who had once avoided us now stopped to talk, shame in their voices as they admitted they'd been too afraid to stand up earlier. Together, we worked to rewrite the rules, stripping out the corruption, ensuring no board could ever abuse power like that again. The fines were rescinded, the threats erased, the records cleared, but the scars remained, reminders of how close we had come to losing everything. One evening, as the sun dipped below the rooftops, Mr. Carter joined me on the porch. He removed his cap, running a hand over his gray hair. "You did good, Walker," he said softly. I shook my head. "We did good. I could not have done this without you." He gave a small smile. "Maybe, but you were the one who stood up when everyone else stayed silent. That matters." I looked out at the neighborhood. Children playing in the yards, laughter echoing through the streets that had once carried only fear. "It should not take a war to remind people their rights," I said. "But sometimes that is exactly what it takes." Carter nodded. "Freedom is like a garden. Neglect it, and weeds will choke it out. But fight for it, tend to it, and it will thrive." The word stayed with me long after he left. That night, as I tucked Jacob into bed, he asked, "Dad, are they going to try to take our freedom again?" I sat on the edge of his bed, brushing his hair back. "They will always try, son. Somewhere, somehow, there will always be people who think rules and power are more important than rights. But as long as we stand together, as long as we remember what matters, they will never win." His eyes closed, and I watched him drift into sleep, the innocence of childhood protected, for now. I stepped outside one last time, standing in the cool night air. The stars stretched wide above me, endless and eternal. They try to take away our freedom. I whispered into the dark. But freedom does not live in rules. It lives in us. And as long as it lived in me and my son and my neighbors who had finally found their courage, I knew that Lakeside Meadows would never again bow to corruption. The battle was over, but the lesson would endure.